Hello, and welcome to the Master Integrator podcast. I'm Paul Skelton, and this is officially episode 1. Before we dive into today's conversation, I want to take a few minutes to explain what this podcast is, what it isn't, and why I started it. First up, I'm not here to sell you anything. I'm not here to talk about the latest products or throw around buzzwords that have lost all meaning. I'm here because I believe that it's time, finally, that we talk plainly about what it means to build this industry. And I don't just mean the technology. I mean the people, the roadblocks, and the future. Now, I will acknowledge that I am yet another middle-aged white guy with a podcast, but I've been around this industry a long time. Long enough to hear the same conversations, same complaints, same ideas, going around in circles. So I figured that maybe it's time we try something different. These days, I work for CEDIA as the Regional Development Consultant for Australia and New Zealand. But let me be clear, this is not a CEDIA podcast. I just happen to work there, and I happen to care deeply about where this industry is headed. Before CEDIA, I spent almost 20 years as a journalist, writing, editing, publishing, mostly about the AV, electrical, and smart home industries here in Australia. If you've ever read Connected or Electrical Connection, chances are you've read something with my name on it. I've interviewed hundreds of integrators, sparkies, builders, suppliers, and over time, one thing became clear. The most powerful thing we can do now is talk. Tell better stories, ask harder questions, and we need to stop waiting for permission. This podcast is for anyone working in or around smart home technology in Australia. Integrators, absolutely, but also electricians, builders, designers and architects, occupational therapists, educators, and policymakers. Anyone with skin in the game. In each episode, I'll speak with someone who's shaping how this industry grows. We'll talk about real challenges, workforce gaps, certification, accessibility, design, sustainability, and sometimes, unfortunately, HDMI. You'll hear from industry veterans, from newcomers, from people outside the bubble with something to say about how technology works in the real world. This is a podcast about building something better, together. There's no fluff, no jargon, no smoke and mirrors, just honest conversations about the work that matters. So let's get into it. Welcome to Master Integrator. In an industry that's constantly changing, there are very few people you can describe as permanent fixtures, but Stuart Robertson from Sound Living is one of them. If you've been in this industry for more than 5 minutes, you've probably crossed paths with Stu. He's an integrator, a mentor, a volunteer, and one of the earliest people to take smart home technology seriously in this country. I'm Paul Skelton. I've been working in and around this industry for the best part of 2 decades, as a journalist, advocate, and now as host of this podcast, Master Integrator. And when I decided to launch the show about the business of integration, I couldn't think of a better place to start. This is a conversation about the long game, about building something with intention, about what it means to hand over your knowledge and show up for others. So here we go. Episode 1. Here's Stu. Welcome to the first ever episode of Master Integrator. It's going to be a bit of an odd conversation because we have known each other for about 20 years, so I have to play dumb a bit and act like some of your answers are going to be surprising and hear it for the first time.
Well, that's okay. We can act dumb together. I don't have to act that very often. I can make it up as I go. No one will remember.
We might as well get straight into it. And I mean, why I've got you on here is being the first episode of Master Integrator, I want to kind of go back right to the beginning. And you were there from day dot as the industry kind of got started in Australia. So let's go right back to the start. Let's look at where you came from, because obviously you didn't go into automation from the start. It didn't exist. You went into electrical. So what made you go down that path of going into the electrical industry? Was it something you always wanted to do? Or how did you find your way there?
Yeah, funnily enough, it was my stepdad. So I was always sort of thinking numbers and accountancy or, something academic. And my stepdad at the time gave me some fine words of wisdom. Get out and get a bloody trade, boy. So instead of going to high school and academia, I found myself at Clayton Technical School, which that's a whole other conversation about please bring back the tech colleges, but soapbox over. Yeah, sort of started with woodwork and sheet metal and uh, the usual tech school stuff we had back there, a bit of engineering drawing. And then it wasn't really until I think, now I am going to show my age, Form 3, not Year 9 or whatever we call it these days. That was when they started the electrical electronics part of the course. So once I started with that, that sort of lent me to go down the electrical path. Back then, it was just basic electrical, doing light fittings and power points, and there wasn't much else back then. So yeah, managed to get an apprenticeship at the end of school. Did my 4 years, became a tradesman, and that would have been around 1984, 5, something like that, when I came out of my time. Did 10 years of just basic electrical contracting. Was lucky enough that the boss that I had at the time, another small business, we did a bit of everything. We weren't sort of pigeonholed into one area. So we did everything from residential, rewires, commercial, and a bit of industrial, which sort of gave us motor control. But again, the age thing, we were doing motor control pre-PLCs. There were no really electronics yet. Certainly nothing programmable. So we were doing everything with push buttons and time delays and contactors and relays, and everything was sort of done as a wiring schematic rather than a programmable. And that was sort of how I got started in electrical.
So
Uh,
when did technology come into it?
yeah, so around 94 sometime, I've always had a hobby in vinyl and audio and hi-fi equipment. So I was buying stuff from Frankston Hi-Fi at the time. So one day I went in there and Chris said to me, "You're an electrician, aren't you?" I said, "Yes." He said, "We've got this new thing and it's surround sound. And now we have to put some speakers at the back of the room, and we're really not sure what to do to get the wires up. We normally just deliver stuff and put it on a bench and off we go. Would you be interested?" And I said, "Well, I figure that the holes are bigger so that we have more room to get our hands in. The wires don't hurt when you touch them. How hard can it be?" And that was sort of my entry into it. We went and did this job. Back then, there was no real ProLogic amplifiers. They were just coming into the market. But what you did back then is you had your old 2-channel stereo amplifier, and Yamaha had a product called an E300, which was a little add-on processor, which gave you the processing part for the front, left, and right, and it had a little center channel and mono rears built in. So you can put it on the tape loop of your hi-fi amplifier, for anyone that can remember those, and instantly you had surround sound. And that was basically how we started putting in these systems.
And was that most of the first kind of AV and tech jobs that you had was surround sound, or how
Yes.
quickly did it move beyond that to smart home?
Smart home we haven't even thought of yet. Where are we? We're not even programming anything with a laptop yet. All the very first learning remote controls were sort of macro based, where you've got your learning remote and you get all the original remotes and point it at it and learn sequences of codes and things like that, which I think, by the way, gave us a good grounding for smart home later on, and what not to do, putting every single button on the remote on the one that you give to the end user, because they don't need it. It just confuses them. So yeah, so we weren't really doing anything with that surround, outside of the surround, sorry, at that time. I think the very first job we did was there was a Marantz receiver came out with a Zone 2 and an infrared kit. So that gave us that sort of first pair of speakers down into a second room off the main system. And that was probably the first one I ever did that had that type of audio on it.
So looking back at those first couple of jobs, is there anything you look at and think, "What the actual fuck was I thinking?"
No, because the end result to the customer was amazing. They, when you think back now to what we're listening to now with, multi-channel immersive cinemas and, all that stuff, back then it was still a big thing. Like the look on the customer's face when we finished one of those systems was far better than, "Oh, there's the double PowerPoint on your bench. Yeah, I'll plug my kettle in, I'm done." So yeah, it was actually good. And then I basically ended up started playing with my hobby all day and getting paid for it. So we sort of, I was still contracting back then, and Chris would get a job here and a job there, and then there'd be more and more. And again, it was very Yamaha driven back in those early days. So we ended up with some better, bigger ProLogic processors that were all in one unit. So we stopped the tape loops and the add-ons, and then we started doing what became home cinemas. Mind you, back then the biggest television you could buy was 84 centimeter, so 32 inch. So we've the vision conversations are a whole different story as well. We're talking tube TVs, and not much in the way of picture at all.
So what was the tipping point where you were out there doing a few of the surround sound jobs, and then you decided, I can make a full time go of this. I'm going to start my company. I'm going to go out on my own, and this is me for the rest of my career.
Yeah, well, funnily enough, I actually did work with Chris for almost 10 years. So we were, again, once that cinema thing got bigger, we were starting to put up projectors, because obviously, home cinema on a 32-inch TV isn't the greatest thing for the picture. So we started installing CRT projectors, the old 3-gun, which took a crane, and actually just me, because I didn't even have any help back in those days. There wasn't apprentices or help. Talk about workforce development. We're pretty much doing a room a day in the end. So Chris just said to me, would you consider coming and working with me full time as an installer? And yeah, that was sort of where it started, in the actual working for a hi-fi company, and doing this as an installer, as a full-time installer, and making a career out of it.
So I want to talk a little bit about consumer awareness. So even if we look around today, there's still a lot of people who have no idea what
Yeah.
integrators are and what we do, and the industry even existing. So how has it changed? Has it gotten better? Because obviously back in those days, I would have thought it'd be even harder, that it is completely unknown.
It was unknown, but we were very retail driven back in those days. So we had a pretty easy sales philosophy with Frankston, is that we had a big stack of blank video cassettes. So there we go. They're so old now, I can't even remember how to say it. Uh, and our theory was, if we sold the blank tapes cheap enough, they would come in and buy bulk blank tapes, and that would open the conversation. Oh, you're recording. What are you recording on? Oh, I've just got some cheap video from down the road. Oh, have you ever heard of a stereo video recorder? Oh, stereo video recorder. What would I need that for? I've just got a TV. And we would walk them down to the room, and we would play them surround sound for the first time. And it was literally, where do I sign? So we probably, in those days, we almost couldn't have sold any more than we did, because we just literally couldn't get it installed fast enough. We didn't have the time or the people to install it. But yeah, so that was sort of where that consumer awareness came, and then obviously home theater in a box and some of those things came much later. But it was really sort of hi-fi store driven. We had put a purpose built. I think we had 3 rooms. It was one of, I know it wasn't the first, but I'm pretty sure it was one of the first home theatre display areas or stores in Australia. And we had just a good, better, best, being, good room was the 84 centimetre TV. By this stage, rear projection had just come out. So we managed to get, I think it was like a 42-inch or a 50-inch rear projection TV in the middle room. And then we had our full CRT Harman B&W THX experience out in the back room. So that sort of then started to bring a lot more customer awareness, certainly to the theatre side and the surround sound. Because really, this whole industry was, certainly from my part, but the industry was driven from that sort of audio surround sound, which then became multi-room, which we just can quickly touch on, was one stereo receiver, a resistance-based impedance matching device so we didn't blow the amp up, and then a volume control dial, old-fashioned dial, on the wall by the light switch in each room. So that was, and a CD player, or then we ended up with the 200 and the 400 disc CD changes that became our streaming music platforms.
And when did control come into it? Because obviously you are a big Crestron guy, and you have been for a long time. So where did that enter the
Look,
fray?
the absolute top end of control was probably there. If you could mortgage your house back in those days, you could afford a Crestron or an AMX system. They were there. But my first real control, other than those learning remotes that we were talking about before with the push buttons, a company called Xantec brought out a URC2, I think it was, and it had a software called Drag and Drop, and they took the drag and drop, called it Dragon, had a little dragon symbol. And that was really the first time we were able to do a remote control from a piece of software and actually learn codes into the software and keep the database. But again, it really wasn't control system as in whole house control yet. That was still really just making a controller for the main TV room. Then we got things like, well, it became Philips Pronto, but it really started as the Marantz RC5000, and they expanded that, went into Pronto. I think Xantec ended up with a touchscreen that could go on the wall for their drag and drop system. So it was sort of, well, I can't even remember the years now, but it was probably the late 90s, maybe mid to late 90s when all that sort of started, where we could start to control stuff. I think I did my first C-bus job in around 97, 98, something like that. I think, back Clipsal had this thing. They didn't really know what it was. It was just an expensive dimmer. They didn't even run the training. I think I did the course at the Electronic Skills Centre or something like that. And funnily enough, I actually taught myself how to use a computer, Windows 95, God bless it, as I taught myself that course. So I don't think I'd even really used a computer up to that point.
So that's interesting, because you bring up there about being self-taught, and that is something obviously most of the people in this industry have gone through, and that is teaching themselves, because there hasn't really been a lot of structured education in place. So where did you turn when you first came into the market? How did you actually wrap your head around everything to a point where you can sit there and confidently say, I can sell this, I can charge people money for this?
Exactly what you said with self-taught. We really did just build the industry with tinkering, the old-fashioned mad scientist stuff. We'd open boxes, we'd get a little bit of manufacturer training. They kind of knew what it did, but not really. Within a month, we were basically their tech support rather than the other way around. But yeah, most of it really was self-taught. Then we had this association come to our shores, uh, and they would send some people over to our first little expo, which existed in, pretty sure it was the Hilton, mind you, we don't really remember much about those days, but the Hilton Hotel in King's Cross. Needless to say, why we don't remember much about those days. But the expo was pretty much 3 stands in a corridor and 2 or 3 classrooms, and couple of the more advanced guys that were doing stuff in the US at the time came out and taught us some classes, and that was sort of where that education started from. Again, within sort of 2 or 3 years, that had got a bit bigger. We had Tony Gramani come out, teach us THX courses, get us THX certified for the day. And yeah, that was, so we were at that stage starting to pick up a little bit of education. But again, it was not really internet based back then. It was more, when the guys could come over and we'd have a little seminar here and there. And the manufacturers had started to get a little bit better with their training and stuff by that point. So, but again, the early guys, we were pretty much the ones just working it out. And then it was sort of then on us to start the teaching and start to train people coming into the industry.
So it's hard not to talk about CEDIA, and because you were quite instrumental in them coming into Australia. You and a core group of other integrators kind of got involved with the association and encouraged them to come across. And I believe you bought the first computers for the first office of CEDIA.
Well,
Um,
that's a funny story because we were promised the money for the first computers, and then we spent the money that we didn't get. Anyway, uh, but yeah, back in the day, we thought that there was going to be some merit in the association and its education. So it was very different back then. We basically had their name and some of their resources, but it was really a band of guys here who saw some merit in what it could do for us. We had our own local boards. It was all, under our own money basically. So yeah, but again, I think back then we used it for what we needed it for, and it was really just to educate and try and develop the industry. Some of the things that we tried to do back then, we're still trying to do now. Some of them are working, some of them are paying off, and so it's
Yeah.
just been a
And I think that is kind of the frustrating part is what you mentioned there. Some of the things that you were working on, some of the things that were discussed when I first entered the industry 20 years ago, we're still working on today, trying to get a solution. But it definitely seems like something's kind of turned the corner just recently, and things are happening, and especially around this whole workforce development and apprenticeship side of things. So let's go into that. I guess from that time where you did first start to now, how have you seen the industry develop? Not just from a technology perspective, but from the people within the industry. How have they changed? Are they taking it more seriously? Are they actually educating themselves in a more structured way? Or are you finding that there's still a lot of the same attitudes and a lot of the same behavior out there that there used to be?
I think there's still a lot of the same attitudes, unfortunately. I think it's mixed. I think there's a core group of companies that really try hard to do the right thing by the customer, by themselves, by the industry. And then there's a lot of guys too that just get thrown into this almost like we did back in the day, not actually knowing that there's all of this education and all of this learning for them. So, God, I started as an electrician and, I used to be the guy in the back corner of the rooms that everyone used to laugh at, oh, you're just a Sparky, what do you know? But when I say that there's a lot of electricians out there now not necessarily doing the right thing, I don't mean that they're doing it wrong. They're just not educated on how they could do it better. So, a lot of builders just get with their electricians. Yep, I can do that. Bung in a few audio things, maybe do a couple of smart plugs or whatever and call it home automation, right up to the big reputable companies that are doing the multi-million dollar homes, million dollar projects, really, making that effort to do this properly. So I think, yeah, to go back onto that first question, I think it's still half-half. And I think the education awareness for the guys, the old you don't know what you don't know, that's the bit that we need to get better at, I think. And I think this new getting into apprenticeships and some of these things that we're sort of been working on for a long, long time, and we're getting somewhere, that's really going to help us, I think, exponentially grow this compared to where we've been to where we are now.
Yeah, it definitely feels like at the moment it's been an overnight success, but it's taken 20 years of overnights to be
Yeah.
the overnight success. It's kind of bizarre because all of a sudden everyone wants to play with our industry, get involved and help us build an apprenticeship and a traineeship program. But it's just taken a long time to get here, and we've had to make a lot of noise. And it seems like we've had to make an inordinate amount of noise that other industries haven't had to go through. So I'm wondering why you think that's been, of why it's been such a hard slog for our industry when others seem to have a better run.
Well, I think a lot of the other industries, I'll use in inverted commas, are almost essential services. We need the electricians. It's dangerous. If things are done wrong, there's fire, there's electric shock, which, by the way, also comes into our industry now as well with, the more POE and the more power management things that we do, even at a low voltage, doesn't mean it can't get hot and can't catch fire. So I think, yeah, a lot of it's just been, essential service stuff. Gas fitters, plumbers, all of these things where we're kind of the luxury item on the end of it all, and it's a little bit, not every home will have one yet, so it's been tough to sort of break in and prove that I don't know whether we're worthy of it or, and again, I suppose just being a growing industry, it's, it has just taken that time. A lot of the people that go through this stuff, it's not like this new thing to the world that no one's seen before, and we better regulate it or we better educate it or whatever. And truth be told, we need probably more education than anyone because of the again, when we go back to the old days, we plugged an internet device in. So what? It might have done something for us online. It might have sent an email, whatever. But leapfrog that the 20 years to the cybersecurity issues, to the everything online that we've got now. Like, why we're all not doing hours of cybersecurity learning. We're opening ourselves up drastically to the world like that. I think that's really important. Another area that we really need to look at.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that kind of led to that tipping point within our industry because it felt like, well, during COVID or the lockdown, especially down here in Victoria, integrators who offered networking were seen as essential services. But at the same time, according to the government, they don't exist. So we kind of got into that vicious cycle there. And I think a big part of the fallout from that has now been that there is added recognition and people are starting to listen more to what integrators are doing, but there's still a massive way to go. And it's built around a lot of the work of what you're doing with certification, what we're doing of the advocacy side of things. So how have you kind of protected your business to make sure that it's not just relying solely on AV? Because obviously that is a luxury item to many people, but how have you managed to convert it to make sure that it is seen as an essential service?
Yeah, I suppose it's just been by learning all the subsystems, making sure. I mean, obviously, with my electrical background and lighting, I think lighting control is the most undersold, underdone of all the things that we do. That I think that's the one that gives us the most benefit as far as energy management or just straight out, one button set a mood, as simple as that, or a one button good night, goodbye. And then it's just like, I've got some great photos of, multi-gang switches, just wall cancer, as we like to call it, but, horrible term, but it's what it looks like to some of the designers. And then when you can offer them just a really nice, elegant switch plate in place of all of that, I really think we undersell lighting control. Wellness, circadian, all the different buzzwords for lighting now as well that we can add to this. So yeah, so I obviously got into lighting control, did a lot of lighting, learnt all the major lighting programming languages and sort of became a bit of a subcontractor for being able to do all the different lighting systems out there for some of the electricians that they have the skill to put it in, but didn't always have the skill to program it. And security's a big one now, CCTV, alarm systems, especially for what you read for what goes on in Victoria with the home invasions and stuff at the moment. So our security's big. Again, networking, keeping that cyber security up, keeping networking knowledge up, to keep people's digital life safe. So yeah, it was really just, learn a little bit about HVAC, tie it all together, get a good control system on top of it, keep it simple. Yeah, hopefully create a great connected home or smart home or integrated home or any of the, words we've tried to use over the generations, make sure that the customers get that experience.
I want to talk a bit about kind of the role that you've played in the industry for the past 30 years, because even from day dot, you were volunteering to kind of help build the industry and trying to bring CEDIA over into Australia. And I mean, even when I was with the magazine before I worked with CEDIA, I mean, you put up your hand to do some product reviews, and we found out very quickly that you were basically illiterate when it came to writing articles.
Terrible writer. Bullet points all day.
But you still put up your hand to do that. You educate, you do a lot of teaching. Every time I ask, you agree to help out and get up in front of the classroom. You get involved. Yeah, why has it been important for you to give back and volunteer so much of your time?
Well, I think I just got the start back in the day where a couple of the guys from the States came out for that early expo that we did, and I learnt from them. And I just felt that if I don't help out, or a core group, there was a couple of us in the day that would help out. If we didn't help out, we would have no industry. There would be no job later on. Or if we were putting in bad work, I never saw my, I'll call them competitors, although we never really felt like that. I never saw that as my competition. Back in the day, my competition was the pool builder, the travel agent, the, other areas where their entertainment money went to. So I figured that if we could build the industry well enough and we could build it to a high standard, we'd be around for a long time, and that it would just be, a better experience for the customers. Therefore, so many of the early lighting jobs with the C-bus and the whatever lighting job, the amount of times the builders would just say, "Ugh, that's just all too hard. We can't be bothered." And it wasn't because it was bad product. It was great product. It was just that no one really knew how to implement it and what it did. And you had a couple of computer guys running around who didn't have electrical background and, wanted to do things that, if the wind blew from the north and you hopped on one leg and you had a green t-shirt on and pressed that button, that something would happen. And that's great. We proved how smart we were and how clever we were with logic and automation, but it actually didn't do anything for the customer. So, it was really just trying to keep that. If we had a consistent message throughout the industry, then all of the builders, homeowners, whoever we were dealing with at the time, could try and get a good experience. And instead of where we got a lot of, "Oh, don't put this rubbish in, it's no good, it was a waste of money." "Oh, this is the best experience, this is the best part of my new home, you should do this every time you build." And I suppose that was sort of the philosophy behind just wanting to make sure that people were educated, people came through doing the right thing by the clients, by themselves, by the industry. And, as with everything, we've had a few over the years that there's been ups and downs. And I think now it's almost, people say, "Oh, control systems are going to be dead now and this is going to be gone and it's all IoT and it's this and it's that." But I think no matter how that looks and how much DIY stuff comes along, there's still going to be a big part for the industry to play in all of that as well, because, we know our clients and I know most of mine. Some of them are probably capable of doing some DIY stuff, but none of them want it and none of them care to do it themselves. They will still call me for the most, what seems a ridiculous mundane task that anyone should be able to do. We still get the call to do it. So I can't see how, we will not have a role to play even in this IoT DIY, part of the world as well.
So, what does worry you or concern you most about the future of this industry? If it's not the DIY market necessarily, what is it?
When I say DIY market, I'm going to say quality of product. And that can come from the DIY market right up to the most expensive things that we have ever put in our lives. I think in some instances, I can't say everybody because that's not fair on the industry, but in some instances, there's still a race to the bottom. And with that comes some quality control. So, a lot of the times as integrators, where we're different to the retailers is, something breaks in someone's system, they put it back to back in the box, they take it to where they bought it from, they change it over, they do whatever. For us, that could be the worst installed, the worst location installed part in the house or in the installation is generally the one that we're going to have grief with, because it takes us 3 hours to pull it out. Then we ship it back to the supplier. They may or may not give us a new one or make us pay to fix it. Then we've got the 3 or 4 hours to put it back in again, depending on what it is. And there's a lot of lost time and stuff in that. So I think, making sure that as companies, we've got good service plans with our, whether it's with our customers, with our suppliers. I really think that whole broken stuff syndrome is one thing that, so much stuff you think, plug it in, it should just work. So don't get me started on HDMI, but but it's that sort of thing. In good faith, we buy a product to sell to a customer that we've soak tested it at home and done all that sort of stuff, before we get to that point. But still, you can do all the soak testing in the world, but get one out of a box at just 4 o'clock Friday, and it just doesn't fire the way it's supposed to. So there's that. Keeping good quality products, making, again, that sort of comes back to that, making sure that we're installing good reliable systems. Research a product, set it up at your test bench, make sure you can control it, use it, do it, whatever, before you get it to site. And I think that was probably one of our downfalls back in the old days, is that often the sites were our test benches. So, sometimes we'd not realize that a product did or didn't do what it was supposed to, the day we were plugging it in. So I think we've probably got a bit smarter about, researching products and making sure they do what we say they're going to do before we install them.
So what about in terms of workforce development? Let's go down this path that we've spoken about a lot in the past, and it is a massive topic that there seemingly hasn't been a solution to, but it's definitely changing. So let's start with your role currently on the CEDIA Certification Commission. Like we've said, you volunteered a lot. You've now moved into this role. So what is that all about? What's your role within that group, and what's the group trying to do?
So what we're trying to do is, again, it's about getting better education to the industry. It's Although we know we don't have to be a CIT or IST certified technician to go to somebody's home, it should help. We should be marketing to say that we've, done these courses, passed these certifications. It should mean something that, that we've got these. But really, I see it in the short term as a workforce development tool, where if I'm employing, whether it's a junior or even a technician that's been in the industry for a while, at least I know if they hold those certifications, they should at least have some level. Now, again, we know that people can pass certifications and still not necessarily apply them, 100%, but at least it gives us an idea that they have been through the coursework, they have got some familiarization with the stuff, if it's a CIT or a junior one. If they're an IST and they hold that certification, we know they've got some level of knowledge in plugging stuff in, what they are, what plugs where. So that helps in us employing rather than going for, you know, raw kids or raw people that don't have it. But it's a tough one, that certification, because it really is a proficiency certificate. And at the moment, it probably only means something to people in the industry. But, if we can get young electricians, whether they're apprentices or, just out of their time as tradesmen, if we can get them to go through these courses and get them familiar with what we do and maybe even a bit excited about what we do, because from day dot, everybody's just been screaming how there's no installers, can't get staff, can't get staff, can't get staff, and it's industry wide. And we've never really had that other than through the association. And again, you don't know what you don't know. The core group of people in the association that know the association, that's great. But I was looking for something on electrical contractors the other day, and I thought, oh yeah, there's probably a few in on the peninsula, because I'm on the Mornington Peninsula. I think there was 60 in Mount Martha, just in my suburb. Now, out of those 60, if we had 60 of those guys that were proficient in smart home and, everything that we do, the workforce development goes away, because all of a sudden we've got the people and they're training apprentices and they're, got people coming through. But I don't know whether the association, whether we've probably done an okay job at getting the education content and stuff. I think where we struggle is actually getting it to the marketplace, getting it to the people that matter, and making the consumer aware that we should have it.
Yeah, it's kind of a strange one because obviously this is a topic that we've spoken about a lot over 20 years,
Mm.
and because you are talking about a lack of installers and a lack of integrators, and that's definitely the case out there across the globe, really. That every country seems to have a lack of integrators coming through. But what I've found really interesting now being with CEDIA for the past 5 years is that whenever I have that conversation with integrators and they say they need more technical people coming into the industry, they want more qualified integrators coming through. When I talk to them about talking to electricians, say, well, let's skill them up, come across, there's this immediate hesitance. and they want me to shut down. They hate the idea of me talking to electricians. They hate the idea of me talking to registered cablers. They hate the idea of me talking to security installers because they feel threatened by them. So my question is to them is, well, if you don't want me to talk to them, who do you want me to talk to? You want
Mm,
technical people, but you don't want me to talk to technical people. It doesn't make sense. And realistically, if we look at the certifications, so we look at the CIT and the IST, there's this mindset in the industry. If everyone I talk to says there's no certifications, the industry needs to be certified. When we tell them there are certifications, inevitably the response is, well, I don't mean me. Everyone else needs to be certified. I already know it. How do you think we combat that mindset of the guys who have been out there for a while doing the work, not necessarily doing it well, but doing the work, thinking they're doing it well, that are so hesitant to actually then prove their skill set and get that piece of paper?
hmm. Yeah, that's, I don't know. That is actually a really tricky question.
You
From the
can't.
mindset from where I would do it for my own knowledge and my own personal and professional development. So maybe I'm the wrong person to ask that question because I actually ask it the same as you. Why wouldn't you? Like, why wouldn't you improve your personal development? Why wouldn't you make sure that the systems that you're putting out there are done well, reliably, um, to any certifications or standards that are out there? We could get back on the cabler's soapbox and, how many of our installers are actually registered cablers, even though every one of them not even should be, has to be.
Yep, there's no gray
Um,
area, and I'm sick of hearing that people think there's a gray area.
yeah,
There's
there's
not.
no grey area. Every installer in our industry should hold a cabling license. You pull one cable of category anything or whatever on site, you must have that cabler's license. So, with the right endorsements too, by the way.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah. So, yeah, and look, there's all sorts of, do we grandfather people in? How do we determine someone that's, and a lot of it I think will be, well, I've done this 20 years. What do I need to prove? I know how to do it right. So,
See, I I
um,
I get confused about this grandfathering in. In a lot of ways, I sit there and go, "Yeah, we'd get more certified people," but I know, and I know you know, people out there have been on the tools for 20 years, 20 plus
yeah,
years. They can't do the job.
no,
And if we sit there and give them a certification, we're basically validating their 2 decades of
yeah,
guesswork.
mm,
So it becomes very hard, but where I get stuck is they say there's no value in these certifications, but there's not gonna be any value until we value it. And until
that's
we
right.
actually get to a critical mass situation where integrators start to value the certification, they expect it from new staff, they actually sit it themselves, then there's not gonna be any value in it. And then they're gonna go into this, again, repetitive cycle of saying there's no value. So it's kind of this situation where they're not willing to take the off ramp, and there is a very clear off ramp for them to take.
Yeah, and we'll get all the excuses in the world. I don't have time, it costs too much money, I've never needed it for this long, why do I need it now? Um, you know, uh, again, that's probably the one thing I am a little bit lost for words on because it's been that 20 years of why wouldn't you? So, yeah, it's,
Well,
I
this
don't know
kind of goes
how
into
we
the
can
next step.
make it mandatory, unless something's mandatory, does anybody wanna do it? But I don't know how you ever get to that point, so
Well, this is the hard part, and this is the conversations that I have with the government around making the certifications mandatory and going down this idea of having a license, and it's not going to happen.
no.
And that's the sad truth. It's not going to happen. People need to stop asking me about it because I'm just going to break their heart every time I say it's never going to happen. Essentially, the feedback is until people start dying programming systems, we're not getting a license. So we need to make sure that we have that mechanism set up ourselves. And when you said just before about not making it mandatory, but making people need the certification, I think that ties into what else we're working on around workforce development and the plans for the apprenticeships. So you're heavily involved in this as well, of making sure we have that future pipeline of potential integrators coming through. So did you want to go into a little bit about what we're trying to achieve there with an apprenticeship program and with what's happening? So Paul Vivian's going to be joining me as a guest in the next couple of weeks from Skills Recognition International. He's obviously been quite pivotal in getting this set up, and Steve Hall from Powering Skills Organisation is going to be on the call as well. But did you want to kind of tease what it is that we've been working on?
Yeah, well, I suppose, exactly what we've just been talking about, where we've finally having it passed that the industry will be recognised. It will be recognised so that trainees can go through a program, have their certification at the end of it. Being a government program, we will be able to employ these kids as apprentices and be able to get the necessary training funds that we get back. They will go through their schooling, they will be educated properly. And at the end of the day, it's really just to work for the next generation of the industry, all being qualified, trained, and yeah, again, just making that betterment of the industry over the years.
And the tie-in there with certification, of course, is that we're building this entire program, the apprenticeship program, around the CIT and IST. So if you want to bring an apprentice in and employ one, you have to hold those certifications yourself. There's no way around it. So from your experience with Certification Commission and before that, doing some of the courses, actually sitting the exams, how long of a process was it? Obviously, a lot of people think they probably can do this overnight, but it's not necessarily the case.
Yeah, I mean, through work and obviously being a sole trader these days, it's, you're juggling the work and the training, and it's probably an ordinary excuse for it because some nights I too, like everybody else, get home and go, should I do that module? Should I do the next quote? Should I do some more work? Um, I I think, I don't know, if you really sort of commit to it, it actually doesn't take that long. You can get through the coursework pretty quickly if you commit to it. I mean, mine again, because of my longevity, I've done different versions of certification over the years. I've SME'd certifications. So my journey to get all these certifications done has been a long one because we've never really settled as an industry on a particular one. I think CIT could be the third iteration of the entry level certification now. I sat on one, we did our own Australian version of Installer 1, Installer 2, Installer Designer, and that must be going back maybe 15, 16 years we might have started those. So so there's been a few iterations of it, but I think the difference now is that getting it through the skills, through the apprenticeship, through all these things that we're working on now, I think, you're going to have a couple of year process. I forget what Paul, you'd probably actually remind me of what the year term ended up on the apprenticeship side for.
4 years.
Yep. So it is a full knowledge base qualification. Not a license, but it is a qualification. So, and that's something we've just never had before. So,
Yeah. So you mentioned there that obviously in the past there was an Australian certification, and that's a bit of the feedback that I always get is people keep saying that it's an American certification currently. How would you, how would you describe your role on the certification commission to make sure that it's not US based? And I guess the easiest way is who's on the certification commission? Because obviously you're not American.
that's right. So it is a global commission. There is so there's a few CEDIA staff out of the US. There is two or three integrators from the US. There's two out of the UK, one out of India, myself doing APAC, and yeah, I think that's about it. But it is global. Like we have got people from around the world. So, one of our last meetings where we were talking about, frame and plasterboard and gyprock and the 50 different names that we have for that and the 14 different names for a plaster saw, pad saw, hole saw. We went through all this sort of stuff and then, we've got someone from South America too. And the South Americans said to us, or someone out of Europe, I can't remember, said, well, yeah, that's great, but this entire section means nothing to us because we build out of solid brick. So then we have to make sure that that is all taken into consideration. And our friends out in the West in Perth, they know all about that as well. So even in Australia, we have some different methods of construction and different things that, so we're very aware of that. And the original questions came out of the US, the original training that the questions were made from. But basically, our job is sitting there revising. And look, we're not perfect. A few of them get through the cracks. Occasionally, there's a feet and inches question, or there's a question that relates to some US construction that doesn't relate to everywhere else. But for the most part, we review, and try and make sure that um, we globalize, which also then the globalizing of the exam means it becomes very generic because, if there's a rule, there might be a construction rule in Victoria that's different to a construction rule in New South Wales, which is different to Queensland. That's where we have to do a generic question, but then it might be see local rules for, whatever that may be. It's not unlike for myself with the AS3000 with our electrical rules, but there's also still a copy of the Victorian wiring rules, which, there's some local codes to do with mains and overheads and things that, don't fit into AS3000. So so for any of the electricians who are used to doing that sort of stuff, it's a bit similar.
Yeah, and like you said with Victoria, and it's the same with New Zealand. Obviously, they subscribe to the wiring rules as well, but it is a different wiring rules.
Mm.
It's very similar, but it's just not possible to have education material and certifications for every single region because it's not even just every country; it's every region within every country. The idea of this certification is really to teach the underlying best practices rather than specific codes to
Yep.
your town,
Yeah.
essentially.
And that's where our apprenticeship will come in too, because, we're doing apprenticeship for 4 years. If we were just to teach the CIT module and nothing else, well, we could probably have that done in 4 weeks to 4 months. So, as you said, Paul, the best practices part of it comes in through CIT and IST, but they're only just one part of this 4-year apprenticeship. It's not the entire module, is just that. So, there's a hell of a lot more that we're going to be doing and teaching.
Yeah, and a kid's not gonna go through a 4-year apprenticeship and walk out the other end and be a master at programming and across everything. There's still gonna have a lot of education involved, ongoing education that they need to do, and realistically, that should be ingrained across the industry. People who have been out there for 20, 30 years, they should still be accessing education because technology changes a lot and
All
quickly.
the time. I still spend a lot, as much as I spend a lot of time on this side, I still spend a lot of time learning. You have to.
Yeah.
And be open to changing systems with the times too. Sometimes we can get set in our ways and go, oh, I've used brand A with brand Y, and it works. So we just do it because it makes us money because, we're not reinventing the wheel every time. But there comes a point when brand A and brand Y, model XYZ doesn't exist. And then it's like, oh, now what? I've used that particular multi-room whatever for so many years, and now it's not there. And, you know, now there's this thing called streaming. We don't put the CD in anymore. How do we manage that? How do we, get customer expectations with that? So there's always something new coming along that's going to, change dramatically the way we do things. So,
And
yeah,
we saw a lot of
so
that
you
with
wanna
COVID.
keep on top of that. Yeah, exactly, exactly.
Supply chain disruption, all of a sudden people had to change different brands because they couldn't get
Yep,
what they were used to, and if you didn't understand the underlying principle about why something worked, there was no guarantee that it would work. So,
exactly.
yeah, I think that was a steep learning curve that people experienced at the time, but I think have forgotten very quickly.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
So from here, what do you see as the next step for the industry? What are you hoping to see moving forward from our industry? What do you want to see behaviorally? What do you want to see technologically? What do you hoping we head towards?
From a personnel point, educated people doing good work, making sure that customers' expectations are met, making sure they're happy, satisfied. Again, I think we put a lot of time into the technology and sometimes forget about the human side of it. Uh, the human side of whether we've done a good job with our interface or not. The human side of have we met their expectations? Are they happy with their system? Do they enjoy their home more because we were there or less because we were there? Because again, there's a lot of this smart home stuff, in the middle of the night and lights come on and this happens. And, I always said I've made a lot of good friends and a lot of good clients and over the years, and I like to go and have a glass of red with them. I don't want to be back in their house every other week because they're pissed off with me because something's gone wrong again. So, that's really the side of the industry that means more to me. I mean, products, technology, there'll be streaming, there'll be video on demand, there'll be studios that do good jobs, there'll be streaming platforms that do crap jobs. All of that, unfortunately, again, with our good education, we can identify the things that are problems and either A, get them fixed or just not use them, find a better way, find a different way. Ultimately, it's all about customer experience. That's my sort of view on all of this.
So what's next? Obviously, you've been around a
I'm going to
while.
retire.
You've been saying that
Yeah, I know, for a long time.
for a
I want
long
to
time.
retire.
Bullshit.
Yeah,
Yeah, you
I
might
want to
want
retire.
to.
Yeah.
I want to retire.
Yeah. I don't know. For me, I probably less. Again, that comes back to the better installers and the more people you can work with. But probably for my part now, I probably want to do less on the tools and maybe just more engineering and more programming. So that might be the way I end up. I don't know if you call it consultant, but be happy to work with people to sort of help them out with their engineering. I've done that with electricians over the years where if they're asked if they do this type of work, they just say yes. And I've got my business, but I'll happily put their T-shirt on and act on their behalf and do their engineering and do their programming. And if I get to supply a few products along the way at trade price, well, then that helps as well. So.
And that was Stuart Robertson from Sound Living, a man who's seen this industry evolve from the ground up and who's still giving back. Stu's story is a reminder that this trade, this profession, was built by people who said yes to things that didn't exist yet. People who taught themselves, trained others, and held the line on quality when it would have been so much easier not to. Now, through certification and standards, we've got the chance to honour that legacy by setting clearer expectations for the next generation. If you're not certified, maybe now's the time to take that step. Not for the badge, but for the benchmark. Thanks to Stu for sharing his story. This is the Master Integrator Podcast. I'm Paul Skelton. I'll see you next time.